Okay, it's now 8:30, so we will start. And good morning. I'm Linda Feldman, the Washington Bureau Chief of the Christian Science Monitor. Our guest today is Russell Vought, Director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, who is making his first appearance at a Monitor breakfast. Thank you so much for doing this. Great timing. Mr. Vought served as OMB Director during President Trump's first term, and he's also the founder of the Center for Renewing America and was a leading figure in Project 2025. He has degrees from Wheaton College and George Washington Law School. Now for the ground rules. We're on the record. Please no live blogging or tweeting or filing of any kind while the breakfast is underway, and when the session ends at 9:30, the embargo is lifted. As many of you know, if you'd like to ask a question, just send me a signal, and I'll call on as many of you as time permits. Now, Russ, if you'd like to make brief opening remarks, the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, good to be with you. We are obviously excited about the events of yesterday in the Senate, having the first rescissions package since the 1990s be on the cusp of passing. Obviously, the Senate was a critical juncture for us to get through. We had to change the package a little bit to get it through, but we're really excited about a $9 billion package, basically the same level. We're going from $9.4 to $9 billion. And just the muscle memory of using rescissions for the first time. We tried to do this in the first term, and we literally just wanted to get the process used again. In the first term, we had picked unobligated balances that everyone knew were never going to get spent, so they didn't have a stakeholder, and even that failed. And so I think this is an indication of the new enthusiasm, I think for the first time since the 1980s, of the extent to which we're trying to get a handle on our fiscal situation as a country. We had a huge positive result with regard to the One Big Beautiful Bill, but last night was a critical move forward, and I think we're going to have a good vote either tonight or tomorrow, probably a combination of both, with the rule vote and then the main vote in the House. But I think from the standpoint of the appropriations process, this is the kind of thing that's necessary for us to change the paradigm of the way the town has worked. And I did get a lot of questions from appropriators throughout the process. Probably we'll have questions along those lines. That was the main argument that the appropriators have made. But I think part of the answer is the appropriations process has not worked well. We're under a continuing resolution. We are in a situation where, on a bipartisan basis, you're either headed towards a shutdown because defense increases are needed. For every dollar of defense is a non-defense increase, so you can never cut non-defense. Or big ticket items like a wall lead to government shutdown. Obviously, we handled a lot of those big ticket items in reconciliation, but the notion that we have now dusted off a process that allows on a majority basis to come along after and cut funding is very, very substantial. And this was also a critical test, I think, for us. When we were watching Congress carefully, I was very clear about that. We wanted this to be successful. We have executive tools. We have other ways that we can go about making some of these savings permanent. And those are very much on the table. And it does matter. It does impact our ability to use those tools. If a bill is sent up normally under the ICA and failed, that impacts our flexibility. And so this was big for us to be able to get this across the finish line, and I think we're really excited. And the last thing I would just say before opening it up is just how long have you reported on conservatives' desires to take on something like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting? You guys know I came up to the ranks of budgeteers, and we would put together these lists of programs that conservatives have hated for decades, and we never get them done. We never get them done. They didn't get done in the Gingrich Revolution. They didn't get done, and yet as of last night with the Senate vote and the vote we expect to go very well in the House, we're on the 1 yard line of being able to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which has been a long-standing conservative priority. And again, just to zoom out a sense, we in the first 6 months, Donald Trump's administration has changed paradigms in fiscal matters. We have had the largest mandatory saver in history in the reconciliation package, paid for any spending that was in there, paid for any new tax relief that was in there, came away reducing the deficit. Nothing like it ever in history. The closest thing that had come to it was 1997 and $800 billion adjusted for inflation for that welfare reform. And now changing the paradigms on the ground with regard to the appropriations process. I'm not sure you could ask for a better 6 months than the president is having on a fiscal basis, in addition to having new revenues come in from tariffs, which we never assumed, we never proposed in our first term, interestingly enough. And so that is not only something we are banking on, but we're seeing it come in. And CBO, we have many issues with CBO. This is not one of them. Their numbers are pretty much our numbers, and so we're very excited about what's coming in. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you. And so I'll start with a question, and then we'll move to reporters around the room. And because we have such a big group, and I want everybody who wants to get in a question to get that in, please keep it to one question apiece.
And if people could give me their name,
yes,
that would be great.
Please identify yourself by name and affiliation. All right, but I have a big question, I'm going to cheat and ask big and little. So now that the Recisions package is on its way to passage, what next for the downsizing of government? And then if you could just tell us what your response is to the education funding that's being withheld. And you had the letter from
Sure.
the 10
I saw the letter, read the letter, talked with many senators about it throughout the last several weeks, testified on it in front of the Appropriations Committee. Those programs are under a programmatic review right now. They're multi-year funding, so this notion that they have to go out on July 1st is just kind of precedent. It's not in any way something that has to occur. And these are the programs that we have some of the gravest concerns with regarding the Education Department. These are programs that are something we've proposed, pretty much in every Trump administration budget. They are riddled with the type of critical race theory funding that you would see. You have a preschool program that doesn't do any preschool funding. All it does is indoctrination of 4-year-olds of CRT. You have school improvement programs that are indoctrinating teachers to be cultural revolutionaries in the classroom. So we have concerns with these programs. So they're the ones that we're going to study the most. And we're going through that process. It's multi-year funding. We've got a lot going on. We're aware of the senators' opinions, and we do take them seriously. What was your first question? Next steps?
Just the larger, the larger scenario for reducing government.
So I think, again, we're expecting to have a very good vote in the House, be done with our first package. I've said we were willing to send up additional rescissions. I think, if this continues to pass, we're likely to send up another rescissions package that would come soon, and we'll be working on that to try to get that across the finish line. We're not there yet, have nothing to announce, but we've been talking about it, and there's certainly an enthusiasm. Although, I spent a good hour with Senate Republicans, there is still a great enthusiasm for these rescissions bills because Congress wants to be a part of voting for these cuts and making them permanent.
So on that education piece, if it's so obviously, if that funding is so obviously problematic, then why did 10 Republican senators write you that letter?
Well, I think they have parochial reasons for supporting the spending. I'm not sure. With what I have often found is until you take a hard line with regard to a particular program, the debate doesn't really start until that happens. Until you say, we're reviewing this, it misses some kind of commonly expected deadline, that's when you actually have an opportunity to get in a room with someone and say, have you seen what this program funds? We think you'd be very concerned about it. We are trying to eliminate the Department of Education. That does not mean we're going to take all of the education spending the department is doing and just send it straight to the states. Obviously, we're going to maintain Title I funding and special ed funding, but there's a lot of educational programs that the American people would expect to be downsized. English language acquisition programs that don't actually prioritize the teaching of English, but in fact multilingualism. That's the kind of thing that doesn't make sense to the American people. It hasn't made sense in our budget. That's why we propose to eliminate them, and the type of thing that we're going through a programmatic review of right now.
All right. Cameron Joseph to your right from the monitor.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
You've talked about using pocket rescissions to be able to restrict additional funding past what Congress has so far been willing to do. Susan Collins has said she doesn't think it's constitutional. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's an option for you and what specifically you might use that for heading into September?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure the Impoundment Control Act is constitutional. My belief is that it is not. The President's belief is that it's not. In fact, going through confirmation, we heard on a bipartisan basis, certainly from Democrats and many Republicans, you have these procedures that have fallen into disuse. Why wouldn't you use them to send up rescissions? Found it to be an interesting argument to reflect on, given some of the arguments that I had this week with regard to the horror of considering a rescissions bill. In fact, that was the very process that many people were encouraging us to use. So a pocket rescission is no different than a normal rescission, except for the timing of when it occurs. A pocket rescission occurs later in the end of the fiscal year, within a 45 days of the time that you have to hold the funding, and then the money evaporates at the end of the fiscal year. It doesn't work on multi-year funding. It works on funding that's going to expire in that particular fiscal year. It's been used before. GAO has said it was appropriate under the way that the law was written. I believe laws are written intentionally, and so it is there. GAO didn't like the fact that it was they viewed it as something that Congress should fix. Congress never fixed it. In fact, Congress had an opportunity to fix it when the one-chamber veto was struck down. And they had an opportunity to fix it, and they did not. And so another example of the extent to which this has always been on the books, it's not a line-item veto. We're not changing the law. That would be what a line-item veto would be to do. We're simply articulating that if we can spend less on a program than Congress has intended, then that's an appropriate use. And so it is one of the executive tools that you hear me talking about that are on the table. We haven't made a determination to use it, in part because if we're making progress during the normal course of business with Congress, and we're happy to go to great lengths to get this thing done. A $9 billion package. People say, well, why is it so small? It was small because I knew it would be hard. I knew that it would be a tough vote in the House, and I knew it would be a tough vote in the Senate, and it was. And so we talked about the extent if it had failed, that would have impacted our flexibilities. And so we want to be very judicious, but we certainly want to bring in Congress where we can, but we're not. The President was elected to get us to balance, to deal with our fiscal situation, and we're going to use all of the tools that are there depending on the situation and as we move through the year.
John Gizzi from Newsmax to your right.
Hey, John.
Good morning, Mr. Director.
Guys, give me 1 second to get to you with the mic so I can capture the question for all of you. Thank you.
It's no secret that the President and Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, have had a clash of late. The President wants interest rates lowered. Can you give a precise figure of what the interest rate would be lowered in which it would bring the deficit down? What would the percentage be? 1%, 2%? What would you like interest rates to be?
Well, I don't know what the President has said most recently on that. He wants interest rates lower. Obviously, that is something that we believe would be healthy for the country, for the economy, certainly from a fiscal situation, getting to the point where our interest costs are not as high. and I think that the extent, our main concern, John, with the Fed is just that they're always late. And they were late in the first term. They were late in the Biden administration. I was one of the first people right around the time when Larry Summers was talking about it as well, of looking at the spending that the Biden administration was doing and saying this is going to cause inflation. And it did. And then the Fed called it transitory. Their big thing was supply shocks and the supply chains. They refused to look at it from the standpoint of monetary policy having an impact on inflation, from the standpoint of spending that we were doing that the Fed was monetizing. And so, the president's perspective is that Jerome Powell is constantly late when it comes to his fundamental job. And then we look at, and this is something recently I've taken a look at, the extent to which they can't even do a building right. I mean, there's $700 million over budget with regard to their headquarters. They're $2.5 billion, now approaching the actual cost adjusted for today's dollars of the Palace of Versailles. You do a rack up of all of the biggest buildings in the world, and it's approaching those levels, and we can't afford that. And it's just another example of the Fed's the Powell's mismanagement of the Fed, and the president's concerned about it. These are policy issues. The president has a right to talk about his policy views with regard to the Fed, and I think it's certainly something we're talking about today. Most of the television shows were talking about it when I came in, and I think that debate's is going to continue. We're hoping for answers. We're hoping for a site visit in the next week or so at the Fed, and just get an answer to some of our questions. I mean, they were basically they either misled Congress, or they need to go back to the National Capital Planning Commission and have a reassessment of the project. And I mean, I think those are the important things that we're going to get to the bottom of. We now have new commissioners, Will Scharf, James Blair, Stu Levenbach, who already are, and going to be continue to ask very tough questions on the commission.
Well, are you going to tell me a percentage you'd like it lowered to? Interest rate.
I'm not going to give you a percentage. The president has.
No numbers?
I don't have any numbers for you, John.
Okay.
They need to be lower. I'm not the Fed.
Okay, Tamara Keith from NPR.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you think that Elon Musk and Doge got too much credit for your ideas and your plans.
This is never about any of that. This administration, this president got elected with a landslide victory. Wanted to come and bring the best people, the best ideas, and we never approached it from that standpoint. And we had a great working relationship with Doge. My views were our agency was to team up and work and try to keep up with them at times, and to come along and figure out how to make these savings permanent, and to use what OMB's institutional expertise is for to make it simple. It's not just a flash in the pan, and that's what we're doing right now. So we always had a great relationship with Doge, and I think everyone was just trying to give the president ideas about what they were finding, and I think we're certainly doing that right now with sending these rescissions bills out.
Yeah, can you just delineate though? Like, what was there stuff that we thought was Doge that was actually you? Was there, with Doge kind of flaming out, do you expect there to be any change in terms of the efforts to trim the government? It seems like it's actually moving forward more quickly.
Well, I think I don't think about it that way. It's not like one person was doing this or that. It's, we as an administration, if you're at the NEC and OMB, you're working together. If you're at DPC and OMB, you're working together. If the Vice President's office and OMB, you're working together. That's how we approach it within an administration. And so this was Doge and OMB working in tandem at times. Sometimes we didn't have visibility in everything that they were doing, and vice versa. But that's just an administration getting its sea legs and moving out together. But I certainly don't think that this is anything other than the president's team at every step of the way trying to give him good ideas.
Are you now effectively the head of Doge?
No, I'm not. I'm the head of two agencies. I am the
Only
head,
two?
Only two. I am the head of OMB and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's
Okay.
it. It's always been fake news that I was named head of Doge based on a weird headline, not necessarily the article, but a weird headline in the Wall Street Journal.
See, Greg from Bloomberg, Greg Cordy at the end of the
Greg
table.
Cordy from Bloomberg. Just following up on that, the Big Beautiful Bill had a $100 million appropriation for OMB to look for efficiencies in government. Sounds a lot like the Doge mission. What are your plans for that spending? How is it different maybe from the original Doge implementation? And it comes at the same time as the GAO is getting cut. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of bringing some of those functions out of the legislative branch into the executive?
Well, the GAO should be cut. They should be cut more. They're being cut 50%. I think they should be cut even more. They've become a partisan organization. They're quasi-independent, quasi-legislative. They represent the legislative branch, but they try to not necessarily. It's like their own version of independence, where they don't really want the legislative leaders to be in their business. They had to be overruled by the Senate because they couldn't understand that the California waiver was actually a rule subject to the Congressional Review Act. And then when you just get into their play calls on impoundment and spending, it's all partisan. They had no issue when Joe Biden was doing a programmatic review of the wall funding. Every decision that we make, they call an impoundment. And they have no credibility left. And so... and then just from a very practical standpoint, I mean, they're like the Lilliputians in Gulliver. I mean, they're constantly in your business. They constantly want to be in every meeting. They send constant requests. It's like, can you guys just let us do our job in the executive branch? If you don't like it later, criticize us. But the notion that you're just going to be constantly inquiring, it's just very, very much out of balance. And then to see these cuts coming from Congress is pretty stunning. As to the $100 million, the $100 million is for OMB to scale. We have historically been flat, and the size and scope of the federal government continues to grow. $37 trillion in debt. And the example that I used recently in congressional hearings was, I have a small staff for National Security Division. They have one policy official that's in charge of them. We actually put two in. We now have two policy officials in charge of them. They handled previously the Pentagon, the VA, the entire IC, this whole State Department, all of the so-called independent State Department. I mean, look, there's just the inability to actually have a command of all of these programs. There's just not enough time in the day. We're not big enough, and we're not bashful as an administration of providing resources where they're needed. OMB was never subjected to RIFs intentionally because we're in charge of the deregulatory agenda. Why would we subject ourselves on RIFs when we're the ones that are trying to deregulate the economy? Similarly, we need the resources to be able to go line by line in a more detailed way than we can and have been able to. The team is fantastic. They've made do. But there was a lot of senators that wanted that. There was a lot of senators that made this something that they were fighting for. We actually never asked for this. The senators were, of course, arguing in the normal appropriations process for more resources. Jack Reed had an issue with us having 20 additional FTEs. I mean, it's incredible. But we never asked for this $100 million, but we're going to use it to scale. And the senators that were interested in this, obviously your more conservative ones, were looking for OMB and to come alongside a broken congressional budget and appropriations process and work with them. And we haven't filled out the details of it to be able to have a more fulsome review of the federal budget, and we're excited to do that.
Jonathan Salant from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
One of the programs that have come into your life has been DEI. And why is that such a focus of the administration? And what do you say to lawmakers who told me, black lawmakers who told me that they feel that there's been a rollback of all the civil rights progress they've made over the last several decades?
No, I mean, they shouldn't view that. In fact, if you do some reading in the theories behind critical race theory, and I did a lot of it while we were out of government. It was an assignment the president had given me in the first term to defund the critical race theory trainings. We were just talking about the HR trainings at the time. And then do a lot of reading. The critical race theory is a reaction to the civil rights movement. It is a reaction to what the civil rights reformers were going for and pressing the country to have equality under the law. It's a reaction, and you hear the argument, well, it's just a thing. It's like a theory in law schools. It started in law schools. It was a viewpoint in law schools that the law itself, if you say equality under the law itself is unequal. It's systemically racist itself. And so if you're pushing for that, you are pushing for something against the interest of those particular communities. And so it was a reaction to that. And so that's where you have a move towards state-sanctioned racism in the form of favoritism for different communities of color. Fast forward, that legal theory gets embedded in our bureaucracies, and you have a fundamentally woke bureaucracy that is dividing people on the basis of race and identity. And I think that is something that this administration was elected to fix. We talk about in terms of eliminating woke and weaponized bureaucracy. It's not just, the big government that we would talk about with Bill Clinton or Jimmy Carter. The bureaucracies themselves are, when they're funding grants, they're funding it for the types of CRT informed, and every agency has its different version of it. So it could be digital equity at Commerce, it could be environmental justice at EPA, it could be culturally responsive learning at education. All of these are different branches of the same tree, and it's fundamentally wrong. Similarly, weaponization. Every agency, and we're obviously handling much of the excesses right now with our new people who are in charge. But at the bureaucracy level, with the people who are running these programs, the reason why it has to be downscaled is that there are pockets of bureaucracy that are, weaponized against the American people. When you have Drake's Oyster Company that can't get a license that their company has relied on to harvest oysters, and for decades, because of an intentional partisan vendetta, that's weaponization. When you look at the Department of Labor, and a consignment shop owner is not allowed to open her store early so she can give volunteers to help her with the store, give them discounts later in the day, that's somehow a misuse of the employer-employee relationship. That is a form of weaponization. So our view is that you go agency by agency, and you have this bureaucracy that needs not just new leadership, which the president has provided, but it has to be fundamentally scaled down.
Okay, Massimo Calabrese from Time Magazine, to your left.
Good morning. Thanks for doing this fascinating conversation so far. I had a Musk question, but I'm going to pivot off that to foreign policy. Democrats and many Republicans criticize you and the administration for cuts to what we call soft power programs abroad. Do you credit the argument that the administration is ceding the field to China in many strategic locations around the world? And secondarily, is there a moral cost to some of the cuts to humanitarian aid?
We don't think this is an argument about soft power. We haven't proposed the elimination of the Development Finance Corporation. We're still supporting funding to be involved at the leadership level of many organizations that are international. Have we proposed substantial cuts? Yes, absolutely. We're hoping that other countries pay more of their fair share. Let's take PEPFAR for a second. The president's not opposed to PEPFAR, and the president has maintained support at every juncture for life-saving treatments. Our opposition has been to kind of the NGO groups that don't share the values of the administration that are also a part of the PEPFAR, and substantially the extent to which our country is shouldering the burden of now $120 billion since the program began, and our view that other countries should be a part of shouldering that burden. So that's really the way that we look at foreign aid. And the extent to which, if you're wasting money on a gay pride event in Prague, that's going to have an impact not just on you fiscally, but that actually hurts your foreign policy. And that is the kind of thing that we're asking in our foreign policy review to go through and have a extensive assessment of everything that we're doing. And we're going to come away with that. I don't want to speak to it because it's pre-decisional and deliberative, but in our recommendations to the State Department, we've supported to maintain programs that we thought are effective. So it's not about soft power. It's not about pulling back from the world. It is about ensuring that we don't fund stuff that's junk. Like the days of the NASA space camp in Pakistan are over. The days of the Afghanistan rugby league are over. We've got to get beyond that and ensure that if there's a really important foreign aid project, we're all excited about it. We know what it is, and it's actually going to lead to the United States of America being safer.
Violet Gira from Notice.
Thank you. What is your response to arguments that utilizing Recisions has damaged? Thank you. What is your response to arguments that utilizing Recisions has damaged the future of a bipartisan appropriations process? There are many senators on both sides who don't see how the government gets funded by that next deadline. Are you prepared to give Democrat senators assurances that the funding levels they agree to in the next funding bill won't be altered further down the line without their votes through Recisions?
I'm not. Look, my view is that the notion of a bipartisan who ran and won on an agenda of a bipartisan appropriations process? Literally no one. No Democrat, no Republican. There is no voter in the country that went to the polls and said, I'm voting for a bipartisan appropriations process. That may be the view of something that appropriators want to maintain. And I want to have very good relationships with all Republican appropriators. I'm willing to work with Democrat appropriators if they conduct themselves with decorum. But with the Republican appropriators, I want to have a great relationship with them. We're going to disagree at times, but that doesn't mean we can't have a very good relationship. And I do, in fact, have a good relationship with them. But the appropriations process has to be less bipartisan. We're $37 trillion in debt, and we produce CRs. Every year. And to the extent that we don't produce CRs, it's not individual bills that get signed into law. It's omnibus bills that no one has read before. I might add that omnibus bills are a feature, not a bug, of the Impoundment Control Act. So if you only need the president's signature once, and then he doesn't have a view on the management of the money for the rest of the calendar year, you're going to put everything through on that omnibus bill and jam it through, get his signature, probably when 5 foreign affairs crises are happening, and he can't afford to have that particular fight. So I know that's the argument. I actually think that over time, if we have a more partisan appropriations process, for a time it will lead to more bipartisanship. So if the only game in town, because of rescissions, pocket rescissions, potentially impoundments, are on the table, the only game in town is the actual budget process working. If I propose to eliminate the community development block grants, is go to zero, and the appropriators want to go and cut it by half, and that's the meeting of the middle. That we have improved the process. We've gone back to the way it used to work, and we have restored budgeting. And we don't have any of that right now, and I think we can actually get that. We get that because you have the executive branch ensuring that it's not cowing to a legislative branch understanding of its own authorities and powers. We are not saying that the power of the purse does not belong with Congress. It absolutely does. It is one of the most constitutional, foundational principles. But that power of the purse does not mean the ability. It's a ceiling. It is not a floor. It is not the notion that you have to spend every last dollar of that. 200 years of presidents had the ability to spend less than appropriations, and did. It was not only precedent, but it was a part of how the original founders understood what they were separating the powers between the executive and the legislative branch. So I think we will have that debate along the lines of the question that you asked. It's not going to keep me up at night, and I think it will lead to better results by having the appropriations process be a little bit partisan. And I don't think it's necessarily leading to a shutdown. I think we will be able to get to a good result. We'll see what the House is willing to bear. We won't have a lot of cuts that we're asking for them to do. Obviously, they're the first in the process and being able to establish a negotiating level, and we're working with them right now. And I'll turn a lot more of my mind share to that now that this first Recisions bill is done. You guys are getting no questions.
Okay, hold on. I've got a little list. I'm going to do this in the order, but I'll look to you guys in a minute. Claire Jones from the Financial Times to my left.
Claire Jones, Financial Times. Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this morning. I'd like to go back to the Fed, if I may. The focus on Powell's role in the renovations of the Fed has led to question marks as to whether the administration could look to fire Jerome Powell for cause, as it's referred to in the Federal Reserve Act. It'd be great if you could comment on that. People in markets also tell us that they feel as though the administration is attacking Fed independence, and that could raise the government's cost of borrowing because it'll lead to more pricing in of inflation expectations and inflation risks, and that'll raise the prospect of a higher yield on, say, the 10-year Treasury note. So it'd be great if you could comment on that too. Thank you.
Well, our view of the Fed right now, we've talked about it from John's question, but the president said he's not likely to fire the Fed. He's spoken very clearly on that. He doesn't lose his ability to have policy viewpoints, and so he's in the first term, this term, he puts those viewpoints out there. We defend them. And this is one of those. In addition to the low rates, the extent to which the building is a problem, and people always want to say it's for this reason or that. Sometimes it's just outrageous, and that's what this is. It's an outrageous cost overrun. The president is a builder, and he's offended that it's a cost overrun. And we've been looking at this for a while. We've been looking at the extent to which the National Capital Planning Commission should have a bigger say over whether the plans have been changed, whether they should be reconsidered, and we're going to do that due diligence. It's not a metaphysical debate about the Fed and its independence. It's just a building that is being built really badly and leading to massive cost overruns, and then you get all manner of features that were in the original plan that Jay Powell has now walked away from that are just largesse. The rooftop terraces, the elevator that goes is only for VIPs. Now, they have explanations that they say those aren't the case anymore. We're going to get to the bottom of it and see where we are. But it's, the American people elected this president to care about these kinds of things. And one of the things I love about the president, there's nothing that's too small, and this is not small, but there's nothing that's too small that the president won't care about. And it makes it very energizing working for him, and that's one of the reasons the American people love him so much.
How often do you talk to the president?
I'm obviously a regular member of the policy team. I don't get into how often I talk to the president or anything along those lines.
Okay. Jeff Stein from the Washington Post.
Hey, thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking for just a little bit of help understanding something. So I just checked the DOJ website. They claim $190 billion in savings for the American taxpayer thus far. To state the obvious, the Recisions package at $9 billion is far from the $190 billion in savings that DOJ is claiming. Does that mean that the administration believes that some order of magnitude of cuts, like $181 billion, is able to be cut without congressional approval? And why haven't we seen, I covered your first, the first administration, you put out a lengthy budget, it had interest rate numbers, it had inflation numbers, it had deficit numbers. Like, you can debate what's in that and those assumptions, but like, it gave us a sort of document that we could write about and ask you about, and that hasn't been forthcoming. I know the tax bill complicated things, but is that forthcoming, and am I understanding correctly that the administration believes that there's roughly $181 billion or so that it does not need congressional approval to unilaterally excise from the budget?
I don't look at the DOJ website religiously. I will say that our numbers broadly track with the numbers that they've always used. We have $163 billion in non-defense cuts for fiscal year 26, and that was one of the, DOJ was working on a fiscal year 26 basis.
Is that the proposed number?
Correct. I thought your question is...
already saved $190 billion for taxpayers.
So when they say they've canceled a contract, that funding is out there. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be made permanent. So you may have canceled the contract or canceled the grant program, but the agency still has the funding that you need to find a way to make that permanent. So our view has been we need to come along and make those savings permanent by not figuring out some way to not spend the money. So some of that involves $163 billion for next year's fiscal year, and then we have fiscal year 25 as well, which we're in the middle of. We did $3 billion right after the CR. The way they wrote the bill with emergency spending, we were able to immediately cancel $3 billion. We're on the cusp of $9.4 billion. We'll likely send up additional package. So we're right in the ball.
$160 billion short. I mean,
you just said there was $190 billion.
That's what they claim. And you articulated that Congress, $5-6 billion?
I said we're at 100. This is a 2-year project for purposes of that number, and we are 160 of it is in the next fiscal year. And I'm not governing our ambitions based on what the DOJ website is saying, but we're right in the ballpark between the 2 years of that number. Well, you had another question in terms of our full budget proposal. So look, we're certainly going to write a full budget eventually. If we were to put out our full budget in the middle of reconciliation, it would confuse the entirety of the country. You say, well, what is this, the reconciliation, or is this budget? Like, which proposal is going with? I mean, it would have been very chaotic, and it's just something that wasn't in our interest to do. And so we will do a mid-session review later in the summer. That will provide you more additional details of what we believe we've done as an impact, and then we'll flow into our normal budget process later in the year for next year. Congress has, this is another fake news, Congress has everything it needs to be able to do the appropriations process. Period. End of story. They have everything they need. They have the full appendix. You guys have reported on it. I think you reported on it late on a Friday night. And they have what they need, and we will provide additional information, but we're going to do it on our terms, and it's all intentional.
Sungmin Kim from AP.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this, Director Vought. Just a couple follow-up questions on the Fed renovation project. This was going through the approval process in the first term, and I'm curious, since you were OMB director then, did anybody in the administration at the time raise concerns about the size and scope of the project?
I don't remember us having conversations about this. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't go through any kind of deliberative process during the first term. As you know, the Fed has an overexpansive view of the stuff that they have to involve other agencies with. Just to give you a sense, they should be sending their rules through OIRA right now. They are not doing that. That is something that is another concern that we've had. The president put out an EO for independent agencies to send their rules through. And so the extent to which it's very, very, I don't know the forensics of your question, but it's very possible that conversation was never occurred. Regardless, even if it did occur, we are where we are right now, and it's way over budget. It's not the $1.8 billion. It's $2.5. And if you've ever been there, I don't know if any of you have ever been there. I have to go over there as part of being director of CFPB, and we go to the Martin Building. The Martin Building is the building number 2, and it looks like itself is a palace. You go through the halls, and the artwork is just, there's so much artwork. I mean, the level of largesse. These are people this is an institution that has no accountability. And so a little bit of accountability to ask questions, a 2-page letter, and allow a site visit so we can get to the bottom of this and have the National Planning Commission ask questions is not too much to ask. And I don't think it's sufficient to ask their Inspector General, who was appointed by Jay Powell, not doing the requisite amount of consultation with me as the director of CFPB is enough to ascertain whether this is what's going on with this project.
And the Fed says they're not subject to the Planning Commission's jurisdiction. So can you respond to that? And also just on the broader point, and I know Claire touched on it a little earlier, but is this not a pretext to fire Powell over interest rates?
Again, I think this is about the president's a builder who's outraged about a cost overrun on the building. There's a lot of policy debates that are going on regarding the Fed. We have policy opinions, and he said as recently as yesterday that he's not likely to make a change there.
Unless there's cause, which these guys seem to be building cause.
Right. I'll let the president speak for himself on that. We're going to get to the bottom of this particular building and see where the conversation goes. But this is not a metaphysical debate about the Fed's independence.
And just and on the Planning Commission not being part of the Fed's.
Well, they went through it the first time, so they didn't make that argument then.
Okay, Sophia Kai, are you Politico?
Yes,
yes.
I'm at
Okay.
Politico now.
Okay.
At Axios.
Okay, Sophia, you're up.
How do you see your expansive role in Washington and in the White House?
I don't have an expansive role. I'm the director of OMB.
Well, your team is very policy heavy. You've moved shipbuilding into your office. You're now involved in accountability with the Fed and potential fraud. How many people are you bringing in, and how would you describe your role?
I'm just your ordinary OMB director, getting to do it for the second time. I just happen to have another agency that I'm temporarily the head of. OMB's is doing the same job it's done in each and every administration. There's just this moment where the president ran on these issues. There's a lot of national debate about fiscal affairs, about deregulatory issues. And we've got a team that's experienced and was there the first time around, and we've had the opportunity to think about. I mean, how many times do you get a chance to think about a job that you did once, and then to hit the ground running? And we're having fun, and we're working on a lot of different issues. Shipbuilding is certainly a priority. The president wants to restore maritime supremacy. We now have a slug of money from the reconciliation bill, Coast Guard, Navy. All of these things need to be implemented, and that's an area where OMB, in the management portion of what it does, will be leaning in, but it's no different than previous administrations.
How is it? You said you're having fun. How is your work fun?
What's not fun?
I don't know. Work is work, right?
Or what would success look like at the end of 28?
28? We want to put the country on a path to balance. We want to go as far as we possibly can. The president wants to balance the budget. We want to have not be blaming the town for problems. We want to change the town to be able to get fiscally responsible results. And I think the president is showing in his first 6 months exactly that. We're doing it differently. We're changing paradigms. We're prompting conversations that haven't occurred in my lifetime. But we're making a ton of progress, and we only want to build on that, and I think we're going to be successful.
Okay, Victoria Churchill from the Daily Mail.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here today, Director Vought. One of the things that didn't make your bio at the beginning was that you served on the RNC Platform Committee in between administrations. Can you talk a little bit about what your involvement in the president's political operation looked like, how that relationship was in between administrations, and how that's contributed to the work you're doing today?
It wasn't much involvement. I was asked to serve in that role. I found it a fascinating job. Just working on the platform. The president was very involved, more involved, I think, than any presidential candidate had been. And it really was a template for stuff that he cared about. And that was really important. The document that he took to the convention, took to the American people, was his document. And that's really the extent of my 2-month involvement. And then I went back to being a think tank head.
Ian Colgren from Bloomberg Law.
I was struck a few moments ago when you talked about Doge. You talked about it in the past tense. You said we had a good relationship with Doge. Obviously, Doge, as I think Jeff mentioned, is still posting things, still tweeting. There are many officials from Doge who still work in the administration in some capacity, some for Doge, some for various agencies. Do you see your relationship with Doge as over? And if not, what role are those folks playing in things like the regulatory agenda, which we have not seen yet?
I wouldn't read too much into past tense. I would just say that the energy of the remaining Doge individuals is largely at the agencies, working for the agency heads. So you may have a McKinsey consultant. They're still called McKinsey. They're working for an agency head. And I think that is very similar to what is going on with Doge. And there's a lot of awesome Doge individuals, and they're doing a really important work. But they're all working for an agency head giving advice. And it's much less of a directive sent out from kind of a main office. So that's all I was getting at.
To what extent are they working on the regulatory agenda, and when are we going to see that?
Soon. We're working on our spring agenda, now summer. And we're going through the process. Every administration, not unlike the budget, takes a little bit of time to get the spring agenda out the door. They're involved in that as well, again, from the agency's perspective. And we will get that out soon.
Before Labor Day, before August, before Christmas?
Soon.
Okay, Ken Tran from Bloomberg, the other end.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Can you give us a sense of timing as to when you expect another Recisions conference for the Hill? What would that look like to some people?
I don't want to get ahead of the package itself. I think we've touched on some of the themes that it might reflect. But I think it's likely to come. I think it's likely to come soon, but we're not there yet.
Okay, and then to the left, Jen Bendery from HuffPost.
Hi. How you doing?
Good.
Good. I want to ask you about NIH. I talked to a lot of lawmakers and medical researchers who are very concerned about the U.S. losing its edge on biomedical research with all these cuts at NIH. I think at least 1,200 people, have been pushed out of the department. I know the agency is facing like a 40% cut in its budget. The concerns I've heard from numerous people are generally centered around young scientists now leaving the country to go elsewhere because we are not providing the same opportunities here. NIH, known as the crown jewel by many, as in not just the United States but globally for science. That is something that it appears we are, based on the people I've talked to, we are at risk of losing if we haven't already lost some of our edge. Do you have any Do you have any response to people who are worried that this devastation is going to happen, that we are going to lose our edge, that people are leaving the country already? Students don't want to stay here because they're seeing what's happening to our NIH.
I have many responses. Number one, in the aftermath of the pandemic, if the NIH was a business, their stock would be pennies based on their contribution to the last pandemic and funding gain-of-function research through EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute. And that is something that we continue to inquire about and maintain. And the notion that the brand of the NIH and their funding levels shouldn't be adjusted for the reality of the mistakes that were made. Gain-of-function research was not even approved by Barack Obama. It was then offshored, essentially. Who knows how much of the previous administration had an informal say in that decision. But then you get to the fact that the NIH is spending $5.1 million enhancing diversity of researchers at Northwestern University, $2.3 million to inject dogs with cocaine, $75,000 for a Harvard study on lizards being blown off trees with leaf blowers, $699,000 for studying cannabis use among sexual minority, gender diverse individuals, $118,000 for a metal replica of Marvel Comics Thanos so he could really snap his fingers. So that's NIH. It's outrageous. An extent to which the facade of the so-called crown jewel of the NIH is built on this nonsense is a problem and fundamentally unrealistic. I've talked to a ton of university presidents in the aftermath of coming back to OMB. We're having many conversations on indirect cost rates. It's another issue, by the way. Bill Gates spends 10% on indirect cost rates when he funds a project. We're magnitudes way above that. We're saying that we should be at about 15%. And so that's totally reasonable. So the NIH has been mismanaged for too long. Jay Bhattacharya is going to do a fantastic job. We're returning NIH not to zero. We're returning them to essentially the levels that they were at before we left office in 2020. So again, the NIH is an example of an agency that needs fundamental reform, and the notion that we can't touch it because it's the NIH. CDC is the same way. I mean, CDC, I had this question in the Senate hearing from Senator Ossoff. I mean, the notion that the CDC shouldn't be reformed after they got a once-in-a-100-year pandemic and they fell flat on their face, and the Biden administration felt that they needed to be reformed. I mean, we have to get beyond the fact that we view a funding level as an approximation of the value that the agency should perform. We all believe we need an NIH. We all believe we need a CDC. We also need a good one. And to the extent that the funding levels can drive reforms is our view as an administration.
What do you say about the brain drain that people are fearing is happening with young people already going over? Like, I know anecdotally this is happening. I know from various things I've read that there's already signs of young people leaving the country.
Again, the same conversations that I've had with the leadership of these schools is that ultimately this debate can be one that keeps people here as they work on research that is legitimate. That is, when we say this is bipartisan research that the country needs, that there is a much stable foundation for the long-term investment in these key areas. And I think that will continue. We just got to get through this point of being able to reform them.
Okay, to your right.
Citizens packages come to the Hill that Republicans, and I'm not talking about Susan Collins, I'm talking about John Thune and Trump allies. They want more communication and details on different accounts in these packages.
The detail argument was a complete meme. All right, we gave the same amount of detail and information that previous Recisions packages had. The way this package was structured was we basically took a laundry list of the waste and abuse that we had found in conjunction with DOGE, working together, whoever asked me that, and said, what's the dollar amount of that? The dollar amount you don't need to go through and allocate that to sub-accounts. You just provide less on the top line, and you go through the normal process that you would to allocate to the accounts. This is the same level of detail that appropriators do when they provide a bill. They say, this is the amount that we're providing, or they have a rescission, and they put the amount of rescission, same thing that they do. There was a comparison to earlier ICA packages, and our ICA package is reflective of what previous ICA packages. So people always want more detail. We provided all the detail that was needed. It also telling them, like, they didn't. If I tell you, okay, what are the global health cuts, and I tell you they are PEPFAR and family planning, what more detail do I need to give you? They're literally two accounts. That is the kind of detail that we were providing them. And at a certain point, you can keep talking about it, keep providing the explanation, but I think that if you're committed to passing the bill, the $9 billion or not, and I think people showed that with their vote, and that's where we are. We will provide as much detail as they need, if we're doing another rescissions package. But we have great communications, again, on this bill. Let me just provide a little history. This bill was delayed precisely because we were working with House appropriators. We went over there, we walked it through with Tom Cole and Mario Diaz-Balart. They made changes. It became not just DOGE savings, but a little bit of policy with regard to World Health Organization, the UN peacekeeping, and they made changes. They hit our $9.4 billion number. Great. We accepted it. It passed. So how can you say we weren't collaborating? Of course we were collaborating. So I just don't buy the argument. I respect the people who are making the argument. I just don't agree with them.
Okay, it's 9:31. I promised your team I would have you out of here at the 1 hour mark. Thank you all for coming, and thank you too, and please come again.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you.